Do you ever notice how loud the world gets when you start focusing on yourself? The moment you pull your energy back, the noise gets desperate. People start asking questions. They start wondering why you're quiet, why you're distant, why you're not explaining yourself anymore. But that's the thing. When you finally start focusing on yourself, you don't owe the world an explanation. You're not ignoring people. You're just choosing peace over proving. You're not acting different. You're becoming disciplined. You're not silent because you're weak. You're silent because you're wise enough to know your energy is sacred. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, something powerful starts to happen. The things you used to chase start finding their way to you. The people who are meant for you begin to recognize your peace instead of your presence. The opportunities that fit your growth start showing up naturally. You stop forcing, you stop explaining, and you start attracting. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's alignment. The moment you stop wasting your voice trying to convince the wrong people and start using your time to build the right version of you. The truth is, not everything needs your reaction, and not everyone deserves your energy. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop talking and start working, start healing, start growing, start building quietly until the results speak for you. Because the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. Power doesn't shout, it shows up. Strength doesn't perform, it produces. When you learn to focus inward and move in silence, you stop needing validation. You stop craving applause. You stop explaining your purpose to people who don't even understand theirs. You become peaceful in your process, steady in your steps, and patient with your progress. That's when everything starts to fall into place, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped fighting what was never meant for you. Silence isn't weakness, it's the foundation of strength and clarity. Most people think being silent means you have nothing to say, but real silence is a choice. It's control, it's power that doesn't need to announce itself. In a world that rewards noise, being silent takes more discipline than speaking. It takes restraint to hold your tongue when your pride wants to respond. It takes strength to stay calm when your emotions want to take over. Silence isn't what you do when you're weak, it's what you practice when you've matured beyond needing to prove anything. Because the truth is, anyone can react, but not everyone can remain still. Silence is the space where you meet yourself. It's where you stop performing for approval and start listening to your intuition. It's where you start hearing the truth that gets drowned out by the opinions of others. The reason so many people feel lost is because they filled every quiet moment with noise. Music, conversations, scrolling, distractions, but never stillness. They fear silence because silence exposes what they've been avoiding. It makes them face the reality of who they are, what they've neglected, and where they've been giving away their peace. But once you learn to sit in silence without running from it, you start finding clarity. You start understanding what truly matters and what was just background noise pretending to be important. Silence sharpens you. It trains your emotions, your focus, your self-control. When you stop reacting to everything that happens around you, you start realizing how much of your energy was being wasted on things that didn't deserve it. The person who controls their reaction controls the situation. Silence gives you that control. It gives you time to think before you respond, time to process before you act, time to understand before you decide. It turns chaos into clarity. Because silence isn't the absence of communication, it's the presence of understanding. Think about how often people regret what they said in the heat of the moment. Words spoken in anger can't be taken back, and reactions made in emotion often cost peace that takes months to rebuild. But silence keeps you from paying that price. It protects your dignity when you could have lost it trying to prove a point. It protects your peace when your ego tries to drag you into battles that don't matter. It protects your growth by giving you the distance to see things for what they truly are, not what they feel like in the moment. That's what makes silence so powerful. It's not passive, it's preventative. It stops destruction before it begins. You start realizing that not everything needs your defense. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every rumor needs correction. Some things simply die when you stop feeding them attention. That's what silence does. It starves drama. It ends conflict. It confuses negativity. People don't know how to fight with someone who refuses to engage. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't react. They can't read someone who stays composed. Silence keeps your power where it belongs. with you. It's not that you don't feel emotion. It's that you've learned how to manage it. You can feel anger and still choose peace. You can feel hurt and still choose composure. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Because silence doesn't mean you're emotionless. It means you're emotionally mature. It means you understand that sometimes speaking less solves more, that sometimes peace is louder than defense, that sometimes the strongest statement you can make is no statement at all. Silence also teaches you who's truly in your corner. When you stop explaining yourself, people's true intentions reveal themselves. Those who respect your boundaries will stay. Those who are only attached to your accessibility will drift. When you start protecting your energy, the wrong people will call you distant, but the right ones will understand your discipline. Silence filters your circle. It exposes the difference between those who value you and those who only value what you give them. In your silence, you'll notice something else. You start hearing what your heart has been trying to say all along. You start realizing that your peace was never gone. It was just buried under all the noise. You start feeling a sense of calm that doesn't depend on people, places, or validation. That calm becomes your foundation. It gives you balance when everything around you feels unstable. Because when your mind is quiet, you can finally see clearly. You stop reacting to every little thing and start responding with wisdom. You stop overthinking and start trusting your instincts. That's what silence gives you, clarity. Most people chase strength through action. They think being loud, being aggressive, being quick to respond makes them powerful. But the truth is, real strength is quiet. It's the person who doesn't need to prove anything to be secure in themselves. It's the person who can be surrounded by chaos and still choose calm. It's the person who can walk away instead of arguing. Because silence doesn't mean surrender, it means strategy. You're not backing down, you're stepping back to see the full picture. You're not losing your voice, you're learning when it's worth using. You start realizing that the loudest rooms often hide the most insecurity. People who are constantly talking, constantly reacting, constantly needing to be seen are often the ones still searching for validation. But silence belongs to the grounded. The ones who know who they are don't need to explain it. The ones who know their purpose don't need to announce it. The ones who know their peace don't trade it for attention. Silence becomes your armor. It keeps you from saying too much, giving too much, explaining too much. It keeps your focus on what truly matters, your growth, your peace, your direction. Silence also builds respect. People start paying more attention to what you do when you stop talking about it. When your words become rare, they carry weight. When you speak less, your presence says more. You start commanding respect without demanding it, because silence gives you authority, not the kind that needs to shout, but the kind that simply is, the kind that's felt before it's heard. In silence, you learn patience. You learn that not every situation needs to be solved immediately. You learn to give things time to unfold, to let people show who they are, to let life reveal what's meant for you. You stop chasing and start allowing. Because silence isn't just about not speaking, it's about trusting. It's trusting that you don't have to force what's meant to flow. It's trusting that your peace is more valuable than your pride. It's trusting that your calm will attract more than your chaos ever could. When you're silent, you start to notice how much of your stress came from trying to control things that were never yours to control. You stop needing to have the last word. You stop needing to fix every misunderstanding. You stop needing to explain your intentions to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that your silence is not a lack of communication. It's a boundary. It's a decision that says, my energy is not available for this. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form. Silence builds your focus. When you stop reacting to noise, you have more energy to invest in what actually matters. You start working on yourself instead of watching everyone else. You stop comparing, competing, complaining, and you start creating. You realize that progress doesn't come from noise. It comes from focus. The more silent you become, the more intentional you get. The more intentional you get, the more results you see. Silence creates momentum because you're no longer distracted by what doesn't serve you. There's a certain peace that comes when you no longer feel the need to explain your every move. When you stop giving people access to your process, you protect your progress. You stop leaking energy through conversations that go nowhere. You stop giving power to opinions that don't matter. You stop seeking validation from people who couldn't understand your vision even if you drew it for them. Silence becomes your safe place, a space where you can build, heal, and grow without interruption. And it's not always easy. There will be moments when your silence will be misunderstood. People will think you're cold. They'll assume you're distant. They'll make up stories to fill the space your silence created. But that's the beauty of it. You no longer need to correct the narrative. You've reached a point where peace matters more than perception. You don't chase being understood anymore because you understand yourself. That's where true power begins, not in being heard, but in being sure. Silence also connects you to something deeper. Gratitude. When the noise fades, you start noticing what you've been missing. You see the beauty in small moments, the strength in simple routines, the lessons in quiet seasons. You realize that peace was never about having a perfect life. It was about learning to find calm within an imperfect one. Silence becomes your reset button. It grounds you, it restores you, it reminds you that you don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to be present. The more you practice silence, the more your energy changes. You stop chasing chaos. You stop needing to prove your worth. You start valuing peace over presence, discipline over drama, clarity over chaos. People start feeling your strength, not from what you say, but from how you carry yourself. You walk differently. You think differently. You respond differently. Because silence gives you the kind of confidence that can't be taught. It can only be earned through self-control. And when silence becomes your default, you become dangerous in the best way. Not because you're intimidating, but because you're untouchable. You can't be provoked by petty things. You can't be manipulated by emotions. You can't be distracted by noise. You've mastered the art of stillness. And that stillness becomes your strategy. Because silence isn't weakness. It's the quiet strength that turns chaos into clarity, confusion into peace, and noise into focus. It's not the absence of power. It's the control of it. When you focus inward, distractions lose their power. The world is full of noise, and that noise is designed to pull you away from yourself. Every day you're surrounded by opinions, comparisons, competition, and pressure to be seen. Everyone wants your attention, your reaction, your energy. But the moment you decide to turn that attention inward, to focus on your own growth instead of the noise, something shifts. You start realizing how much of your stress wasn't caused by what was happening around you, but by how much of yourself you were giving away to things that didn't deserve it. When your focus is scattered, your peace disappears. When your focus returns to you, your power does too. Focusing inward doesn't mean ignoring the world. It means refusing to let it control you. It's the act of pulling your attention back from everything that drains you and redirecting it toward what builds you. Because the truth is, the world will always have distractions waiting for you. There will always be someone trying to get a reaction, something trying to steal your peace, some situation trying to knock you off balance. But the moment you start looking inward instead of outward, those distractions stop owning you. They lose their hold because you've stopped feeding them your focus. Most people stay exhausted not because life is too heavy, but because their attention is too divided. They spend their energy watching what everyone else is doing, worrying about what everyone else thinks, chasing approval, and reacting to everything that doesn't matter. They wonder why they feel drained, but they've been leaking their energy through constant comparison. When you focus inward, that energy returns to you. You stop living life as a reaction and start living it with intention. You stop comparing your progress to someone else's timeline and start honoring your own pace. You stop chasing things that look good and start building things that feel right. When you make that shift, peace follows. Because peace doesn't come from controlling your environment. It comes from controlling your attention. You can't stop the noise around you, but you can choose what you tune into. You can't change what people say about you, but you can decide how much it matters. The moment you choose yourself, the noise becomes background static. It's still there, but it no longer distracts you. You begin to realize that not every opinion deserves a reaction. Not every comment deserves correction. Not every situation deserves your energy. You start saving your focus for what truly matters, your growth, your health, your purpose, your peace. Focusing inward also means taking accountability. It means being honest about what you need, what you've been avoiding, and what you can do better. It's not about blame, it's about awareness, because self-awareness is the foundation of strength. You can't fix what you won't face, and you can't heal what you keep hiding from. When you start looking inward, you stop pointing fingers outward. You stop saying, they made me feel this way, and start saying, I let this affect me. That's not weakness, that's ownership. And ownership is where freedom begins. Distractions lose their power when you stop feeding them with emotion. When you're focused inward, you stop getting pulled into petty arguments and meaningless comparisons. You stop letting jealousy, fear, or insecurity dictate your decisions. You stop chasing validation from people who don't even value themselves. You start moving with purpose instead of impulse. You start protecting your time like it's sacred because you realize it is. You start saying no without guilt and yes without fear, because when your focus is internal, your boundaries become natural. They're not walls, they're self-respect. The deeper you focus inward, the clearer everything becomes. You start seeing who's truly for you and who's just around you. You start noticing which environments drain you and which ones restore you. You start realizing that not everyone deserves access to your energy. You stop explaining your growth to people who never intended to understand it. Because when you're centered, you don't need validation. You have alignment. You're not moved by noise. You're guided by peace. You're not distracted by competition. You're motivated by purpose. Focusing inward also means slowing down long enough to understand what's happening inside of you. Most people stay busy to avoid themselves. They fill their schedule to avoid silence because silence forces reflection. But real growth requires stillness. It requires asking yourself hard questions. What am I chasing? What am I running from? What do I actually want? You can't answer those questions while being distracted by everything external. You have to be willing to sit with yourself long enough to listen. That's where direction comes from, not from noise, but from knowing. And that knowing only comes when you focus inward. When you shift your focus to yourself, you start breaking habits that were built on distraction. You start realizing that procrastination isn't always laziness, it's often avoidance. It's your mind trying to escape discomfort. But when you focus inward, you face that discomfort instead of running from it. You start working on what you've been avoiding. Your discipline, your healing, your habits. And with every small improvement, distractions lose another piece of their control as growth creates focus. The more progress you see within yourself, the less interested you become in noise outside yourself. There's something freeing about realizing that you don't owe your attention to everything that demands it. You don't have to respond to every notification, every comment, every problem. You don't have to prove your worth by being constantly available. When you focus inward, you start moving from a place of peace instead of pressure. You start living on purpose instead of survival mode. You stop rushing because you realize there's no competition when you're focused on becoming your best self. The only person you're racing is the version of you from yesterday. Focusing inward also builds your confidence. When your validation stops coming from outside opinions, you stop chasing approval. You stop needing applause. You stop letting people's silence make you doubt your progress. Because you're not building for them anymore, you're building for you. Confidence doesn't come from what others see. It comes from what you know about yourself. And when you're focused inward, you start discovering strength you didn't know you had. You start realizing you're capable of more than you thought. You start trusting yourself, and that trust becomes your foundation. Every distraction you stop feeding gives you more time, more energy, more clarity. You start noticing how peaceful life becomes when you're not constantly explaining yourself. You stop seeking closure from people who broke you. You stop overanalyzing situations that no longer serve you. You start protecting your peace the way you used to protect your pride. You stop needing to win arguments because you've already won your focus. You learn that walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. When you focus inward, you become grounded. You become aware of your emotions instead of controlled by them. You learn to sit in discomfort without running from it. You start observing instead of reacting. That's how you grow emotional maturity, by mastering the space between what happens and how you respond. And that space only expands when you focus inward. You begin to recognize that peace isn't something you find, it's something you create through discipline. The more you stay focused, the less chaos affects you. The noise may still be there, but it can't shake what's built on stillness. The world moves fast, but peace moves slow. When you focus inward, you start living intentionally instead of reactively. You start paying attention to your habits, your energy, your thoughts. You stop doing things just to be seen and start doing things because they align with who you are becoming. You realize that not everything that looks productive actually moves you forward. Sometimes focusing inward means stepping back. It means resting. It means letting go of what's loud so you can hear what's true. And the truth is, your power multiplies when your focus narrows. The more you pour into yourself, the more the right things begin to flow toward you. Opportunities start aligning. People start respecting your boundaries. Chaos stops feeling personal. It's not because life got easier. It's because your focus got sharper. You've learned how to keep your peace in a world that profits off your distraction. You've learned that your energy is your currency, and not everything deserves to spend it. You start seeing that distraction was never the problem. It was a test. It was life asking you, what do you truly want? And when you finally answer that question through focus, life starts aligning to match it. You stop getting pulled in 100 directions because you've chosen one. You stop being overwhelmed by options because you've committed to clarity. You stop being drained by people who don't match your energy because your boundaries naturally protect your peace. There's power in being so focused on yourself that other people's noise fades into the background. You no longer react to gossip, opinions, or criticism because your eyes are fixed on your mission. You stop looking for motivation and start becoming it. You stop chasing attention and start attracting respect. You stop waiting for the right moment because you've learned the right moment is always now. That's what inward focus does. It keeps you grounded when everything else is trying to distract you. You realize that you don't need to prove your progress anymore. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to defend your peace. You just need to stay focused. Because the moment you stop giving attention to what drains you and start giving it to what develops you, life begins to move differently. You attract what you're aligned with. You start noticing that when your focus is pure, your path becomes clear. The noise that once distracted you now motivates you. The things that once irritated you now teach you. The people who once drained you now have no access to you. When you focus inward, you stop chasing things that were never meant for you. You start living from purpose instead of pressure. You stop asking, what do they think of me? And start asking, what do I think of myself? You stop trying to be understood and start understanding yourself. You stop worrying about being liked and start being loyal to your own peace. That's when distractions truly lose their power. When you realize your energy is too valuable to waste on anything that doesn't move you closer to who you're meant to be. Peace and progress begin the moment you stop explaining yourself. At some point, you realize that the more you try to make people understand you, the less you understand yourself. You start to see that explaining yourself over and over doesn't create peace, it creates exhaustion. Because every time you defend your choices, your growth, your silence, or your boundaries, you give away pieces of yourself to people who never deserve that kind of access. You start to understand that not everyone needs to get it, not everyone will get it, and not everyone is supposed to. You're not living to be understood, you're living to become aligned. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your energy, your peace, and your freedom. You don't need to justify peace to people who thrive in chaos. You don't need to explain discipline to people who are addicted to distraction. You don't need to make your growth comfortable for people who are still committed to staying the same. You just need to move quietly, intentionally, consistently. Because peace doesn't announce itself. It shows up when you stop needing approval. The truth is, people will always have opinions, and no matter how well you explain yourself, they will still see you through their own perspective, not yours. So why waste your breath trying to convince someone who has already decided what they want to believe? When you stop explaining yourself, you stop living life as a reaction. You stop trying to fix misunderstandings that were never your responsibility. You stop apologizing for your boundaries, your healing, your distance, your silence. You start letting people feel whatever they want to feel while you focus on what you're building. That's where progress begins. When your energy is no longer divided between living and defending the way you live, because constant explanations keep you stuck in a cycle of seeking validation. And validation, once it becomes a habit, robs you of authenticity. People often mistake peace for arrogance. They see your silence and call it pride. They see your boundaries and call it distance. They see your focus and call it selfishness. But what they don't see is the years you spent over-explaining yourself, the times you tried to make everyone comfortable while you were falling apart, the moments you compromised your peace to protect relationships that didn't protect you. When you finally stop explaining yourself, it's not because you stopped caring. It's because you finally started caring correctly. You learned that peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from understanding yourself enough to not need to be. Progress requires focus, and focus requires silence. Every moment you spend explaining is a moment taken from execution. Every conversation you have defending your decisions is time stolen from living those decisions. The most successful people you'll ever meet don't waste time convincing others. They let results do the talking. You can't move forward if you're constantly turning around to explain why you're moving. Growth demands that you outgrow the need for permission. It asks you to move in quiet confidence, knowing that not everyone will see the vision until it's finished. There's freedom in realizing that not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. Some people ask questions not because they want to understand, but because they want to control. Some people don't listen to comprehend, they listen to contradict. And you will exhaust yourself trying to make them see what's not meant for them. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop inviting opinions that only slow you down. You stop opening doors that were never meant to stay open. You stop handing your peace to people who don't know what to do with it, because the truth is, peace isn't something you explain, it's something you protect. You learn that silence doesn't need defense. Growth doesn't need validation. Distance doesn't need apology. The right people will understand you without explanation. The wrong ones will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you speak. And once you accept that, you start choosing peace over perception. You stop worrying about being seen as rude, distant, or different. You start realizing that peace will always look strange to those who are addicted to noise. You stop lowering your frequency to match confusion and start staying still enough to remain aligned. When you stop explaining yourself, you learn the difference between connection and attachment. You learn that some people only loved you when you were accessible, when you were easy to reach, when you were always available to listen, help, or fix. The moment you start pulling back to protect your peace, their love starts to fade. Not because you changed, but because your silence no longer feeds their control. That's when you realize that peace costs relationships, but it also buys back your soul. You lose people, but you gain yourself, and that trade is always worth it. It takes courage to stay quiet when you could easily defend yourself. It takes strength to walk away when you could easily explain. But silence is a decision. It's saying, I know my truth, and I don't need to repeat it for it to remain true. When you reach that point, you stop trying to convince the world of your worth. You stop auditioning for approval. You stop performing humility to make others comfortable with your confidence. You just become quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. There's power in detachment. And you find that power when you stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to fix how others see you. You realize that people's opinions of you say more about them than they do about you. You understand that their misunderstanding isn't your burden to carry. So you let them talk, you let them assume, you let them think what they want, because your peace no longer depends on being liked. It depends on being aligned. And alignment doesn't need explanation. It just needs consistency. When you stop explaining yourself, you become lighter. You start noticing how much energy you used to waste trying to make others comfortable with your boundaries. You start seeing how much of your focus was stolen by people who didn't deserve your attention. You start realizing that your silence isn't emptiness, it's protection. It's you choosing peace over pride, growth over gossip, elevation over explanation. You stop needing to prove that you've changed because the change speaks for itself. Progress begins when you stop needing to prove your progress. When you stop trying to show everyone that you're working, healing, growing, or improving, you free yourself from the need for recognition. You stop living for claps and start living for clarity. You stop chasing validation and start chasing vision. You start building in silence, and the silence becomes sacred, because the more private your progress, the more protected it is. The more silent your movement, the more peaceful your mind becomes. Explaining yourself keeps you tied to the old version of you, the one that needed approval to feel accepted. But every season of growth requires a version of you that doesn't need to be understood, because not everyone is ready to understand the new you. Some people can only meet you in your past, not your potential. When you stop explaining, You make peace with that truth. You stop dragging people who aren't meant to come with you. You stop watering relationships that only grow confusion. You start letting go with grace because you understand that peace sometimes looks like distance. When you stop explaining yourself, you give people permission to think whatever they want, and that's where real peace begins. Because peace doesn't come from controlling narratives. It comes from being okay with being misunderstood. Not everyone needs to know your side of the story. Not everyone deserves access to your process. The right people will never require an explanation. They'll just trust your heart. The wrong ones will twist your words no matter how clearly you speak. So you stop speaking for them. You save your words for purpose, not defense. The most peaceful people aren't the ones with no chaos around them. They're the ones who stopped responding to it. They stopped trying to explain their boundaries to those who only wanted to break them. They stopped trying to prove their growth to those who never respected their process. They stopped trying to justify their peace to those who benefit from their chaos. That's what it looks like to stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking peace through words and start creating it through action. You start realizing that your silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. People start noticing your energy, your calm, your consistency. They see that you're not reacting anymore, and that confuses them. They see that you're no longer available for drama, and that frustrates them. They see that your peace is louder than their noise, and that threatens them. But you stay silent anyway, because you've learned that explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is just another form of chaos. You don't have time for that anymore. You've outgrown it. When you stop explaining yourself, your priorities change. You start putting your energy into becoming, not convincing. You start focusing on results, not responses. You start realizing that every word you don't say saves you time, saves you peace, saves you progress. You start loving the quiet because the quiet keeps you grounded. You stop needing everyone to see what you're doing because you trust that the right people will notice when it's time. Then something beautiful happens when you make peace with not explaining yourself. You start to attract people who speak the same language. You start meeting people who value silence, who understand peace, who don't need constant explanation to trust your heart. You start building relationships based on mutual respect instead of constant justification. You stop feeling the need to defend your boundaries because the people around you honor them naturally. That's what peace does. It filters your circle until only alignment remains. The world will always ask for explanations. It will always want to know why you changed, why you're distant, why you stopped showing up for everything. But peace answers those questions through presence, not words. You don't need to explain what's obvious to anyone paying attention. Your focus, your calm, your growth, they all speak louder than you ever could. And when you stop explaining yourself, you give those things space to shine. You give your peace permission to lead. You give your progress room to unfold naturally without noise or approval. Because at the end of the day, peace and progress don't come from being understood. They come from being sure.